Hi there everyone, welcome back to On the Flip Side. My name is Adam Shawwalker, your host, and today we're going to be reviewing this new Municipal waste record, Electrified Brain. This is the 7th studio album from the Richmond, Virginia-based crossover act, with the last release of theirs being 2017's Slime and Punishment. An album I thought had some pretty good moments, but was a little bit lacking in overall staying power, though I still got some decent enjoyment out of that release. I think Municipal Waste, of like all of the modern thrash metal acts, or more specifically here, crossover, have played things really delicately and pretty intelligently, surprisingly so for this genre. And the 2000s were a very busy time for these guys, dropping a pretty big chunk of their catalog early on, but since 2012's The Fatal Feast, they've been keeping things a little bit closer to the chest, seemingly waiting for really solid tracks to form instead of trying to blunt force their way into like a new release every 2 or 3 years like many of their contemporaries. I mean, this decade they've been on a 5-year album cycle, which in most cases I would say is kind of a bummer, but I am really glad for it when it comes to metal, because it gives artists a little bit more time for things to kind of gestate more and become a little bit more thought through. And you can tell the songs on Electrified Brain absolutely shine as a result of that practice, just of keeping the cards and everything close to the chest. And the first thing to really keep in mind here is that Municipal Waste have not reinvented the wheel, mostly because they have not had to, and what they've done instead is they've crafted a very, very nice wheel. What they managed to do is they've created an album that is just over like a half-hour long, and they've made it feel really big without making anything feel forced or bloated. This album feels long while still flying by, and for a thrashy, party-driving album, this is just such a good quality to have. I do think at this point in their discography, Municipal Waste have really nailed down the art of a good, smooth transition from thrash to groove. The track Thermonuclear Protection, for example, is one of the smoothest and heaviest tracks here, and it flows perfectly. And I mean, every song here is on its A game, from the first moments of the album on the title track, Electrified Brain, with only seconds to appreciate the fun 80s slasher-inspired intro. You are then launched into the thick of the album. While Electrified Brain is a killer opener, it really just acts as a palate cleanser and attention grabber, because the steady ascent in quality starts here and runs through to the next track, Demoralizer, a track that acts as a follow-through gut punch of aggression and viciously catchy riffs with some really strong bass and guitar trade-offs that kind of remind me of like classic Iron Maiden tracks mixed with like a Ride the Lightning style chugging that really blends well here. Obviously, the modern wave of thrash revival thrives to a pretty big extent on 80s stylings and nostalgia, but Municipal Waste have done a great job not only embracing that, but building on that with blistering solos and unrelenting riffs that fall right in line with some of the best songs in the genre. Last Crawl reminds me a lot of like the tracks off of The Art of Partying, which for Municipal Waste is always a pretty good benchmark for their quality. It also sounds a lot like a bit of a callback to some of the shorter and faster songs on like the B-side of The Fatal Feast. Gravedive to me sounds like Municipal Waste taking their already throwback heavy sound and focusing it a bit as like an homage to maybe like Anthrax or something. I mean, these riffs are very, very Municipal Waste at their core, but I'll be damned if this instrumental specifically does not sound kind of like an outtake from like Spreading the Disease or maybe Among the Living. And obviously that's like a bit of a double-edged sword in a way, because if that wasn't like an intentional move, it's kind of a cut and dry thrash sound, which, I mean, there's nothing really wrong with that. I just think in my mind I would prefer when stuff gets this close in sound and style. I'd kind of like to think it's linked, and that's probably wishful thinking here on my part, but regardless, it is still a good song. The Bite is a super fast track that is very crossover at 1.5 minutes in runtime, just enough to make a good impression and get you into the next track, but not before a very solid guitar solo. High Speed Steel is just pure Motorhead worship. I love this track. It is just firing on absolutely all cylinders. I hear this song and I want to wear a snapback with the brim folded up, and I really want to just inhale a pack of cigarettes as fast as humanly possible. This shit rips. Like I said earlier, Thermonuclear Protection flows brilliantly. It is also the longest song at just over 3 minutes long, so you know it's a good one. And I mean, seriously though, this track is such a platter of what makes this band and ultimately this album so good. It's tight, it's not afraid to change things up, and it confidently is different in its sounds and segments. I absolutely love this song. Blood Vessel / Boat Jail is a mostly instrumental track that builds on a chugging riff and slow brooding segments and a slower guitar solo into a much faster guitar solo in the second segment, and then that leads into Boat Jail, which is a wildly silly and honestly really good track. I do really like and love this track to a certain extent because Municipal Waste is a really, they're a serious band. It's a serious project that knows exactly how to not act like a serious project at an expert level. It's like if themed heavy metal bands like Ailstorm, for example, knew what the word subtlety meant. Crack the Heat opens with a riff weirdly reminiscent of the chorus riff from Blood and Thunder by Mastodon. And that's not a complaint, that's just an observation. Anyway, though, this song kicks ass. It's just an unstoppable jam that is very densely packed with energy. Restless and Wicked is one of my favorites on the album, mostly because I wasn't really expecting a fantasy, evil wizard and necromancer romp track on this album. It definitely makes it one of the more memorable songs on the album, in my opinion. It really feels like the lyric side of things were pulling heavily from the Dio playbook and owning it very well. 10 Cent Beer Night is a pretty fun track. I do think it maybe tries a little bit too hard to feel almost like a sequel track to maybe You're Cut Off or maybe like The Art of Partying, and I'm not saying that's the intent here necessarily, but while it is a very solid and good song, it is still kind of low-hanging fruit amongst an already very low branch. Hey, it's fun, and I can certainly see this being a crowd pleaser in a live setting. Also, the guitar solos here are very good, and I really, really love the end of the song with its very clear rip of the main riff from Rock You Like a Hurricane. It nearly made me spit out my drink on my first listen. Barreled Rage is another solid thrasher that ends up falling into the more forgettable side. I do like the vocals here, though, which kind of hit like a similar wave to maybe classic Nuclear Assault material. Other than that, this is probably the most by the numbers thrash track on the album, but at the very least, it's in very good company with the rest of these songs. Putting on Errors is the shortest offering here at 90 seconds of blistering crossover punk. The gang vocals here are huge, and I think there's a guest singer maybe somewhere in the mix on this song, which gives it a pretty hardcore edge. I also love the very Marshall JCM 800 tone on the guitar licks here. They add a nice crunch and a nice level of dynamics into the mix that seems to be missing from a lot of the moments on the tracks here. The final song, Paranormal Janitor, is pretty much a let all of the stops loose and just kind of play and make as much complicated noise as possible track. It's like a shotgun blast of thrash blowing a hole through your chest. I do think it kind of fizzles out more than I'd like, though. My only gripe is that the song has a fade out at the end instead of just a building, maybe a bunch of guitar solos, and then kind of just finishing on the drop of a hat, which to me, with how the song starts, feels like it would be a little bit more appropriate. Anyway, of all of the modern thrash stuff that I've heard in the past few years, this is some of the best written material that I've heard. Like I said, it's not a new sound, but damn it, they really waited until they had some good material and some good tracks to present, and I really think that that's why Municipal Waste have stood apart from so many other bands just in a level of quality. There's a general focus on quality that they seem to grasp really, really well. So yes, I am thinking Electrified Brain is a very solid 8. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of the album in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe. And if you want to help the channel out further, check out my Instagram, my Reverb, my Depop. Links to those are in the description below. And thank you all so much again, and we'll see you on the flip side.